Okay. So, yeah, let me just say I homeschooled for 24 years and I do have a blog and it's called 24 years of homeschooling.blogspot.com. What happened was I had put it on my family blog. I was putting the story of our homeschool on our family blog, and there were a lot of more personal things on there. And so my daughter helped me. She just moved it all over to a new blog. So it was just the homeschooling stuff, and we put all the privacy stuff on it. So I have about 34 or 30 some blog posts on that. And I never have finished yet, but I am planning to get back to it and finish the last 10 years. But there's a lot of stuff on there if you want to see things about homeschooling. What I'm going to share tonight was actually learned from, we originally learned it from Susan Kovalik, who has taught teachers all over the world how to homeschool. Not how to homeschool, but how to teach thematically. And then Karen, who is Amanda and Ashley's mom, and Sadie's mom, and Brittany's mom, for anybody else who's on here. Hi, Ashley. So I collaborated with their mom, Karen, and we actually used to speak at like California Homeschool Convention and Utah Homeschool Convention and a bunch of different things. But what I'm going to tell you tonight is kind of just an overview. It would be good if you wanted to leave your questions to the end, but if you have something that's just really super important that you don't think is going to take a long answer, then go ahead and ask me. But otherwise, I'm going to jump into it. And it's probably best if you're not talking to mute yourself, just so we don't have anybody, just so we don't have anything happen during this. So I might just mute everybody. Let me see here. It's not letting me. So everybody might have to mute themselves. That is weird. Okay. Anyway, okay, so here we go. I'm going to share my screen with you. I think I'm going to have to share it first and then, yeah. Okay, whoops. There we go. All right. Hopefully everybody can see that. If you can't, tell me about any technical issues you might have. Okay. I hope this, you know what, anyway, hopefully it's working out just fine. I hope if you guys can't see something, just let me know. We're good? Yeah? Okay. Okay, this is called Brains on Fire, Hearts on Fire, and you're going to see more why at the end. And what we want to share is that education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire. So that's what you want to begin with. When you're keeping the end in mind, that comes from Stephen R. Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. When you're beginning with the end in mind, you want to remember that we think the kids have to be stuffed with all this knowledge, but really you just want to light their fire because they can learn a lot of stuff on their own later outside of your purview later on. Okay. So here's what EPIC stands for. It's exposure, patterns, inquiry, and contribution. And that's what we're going through all tonight. That just those 4 things. And what it is igniting your child's interest through exposure, hardwire meaningful learning into your child's long-term memory through patterns, unleash your child's lifelong spirit of inquiry, and inspire your child to make a contribution to the world. That's what EPIC stands for. You know what? I can't even see all this. I don't know what that says. Oh, I know what it is. It's EPIC and the 4 something of the brain. What is that? Darn it. I can't see it for some reason. My thing got covered up. But it's the four, yeah. You guys can probably see what that is. Anyway, the four, this is bothering.
Functions.
Thank you. The four functions of the brain. Okay, so really these are amazing that they match up exactly. There are four functions of your brain for what it wants to do when it's learning. So think of a baby gathering information through exposure, like they suck on everything, right? That kind of thing. Then you want to make meaning of information through patterns, like they see a chair and then they see a different chair and it might not look the same, but they start realizing, oh, even though that doesn't look exactly the same, it's still a chair. And then you create new ideas through what we call inquiry, and you'll see what that is, and then act on those ideas through contribution to the world. So here's some points about igniting your child's interest through exposure. So the number one function of the brain is to gather information. And that means you have to expose them to things, and exposure comes through your senses. And there are two kinds of exposure. One is experiences, so things that we do with our children through school or anything else. But the other one is just as vitally important, and that is your example. Because trust me, if there's anything I could change differently about my parenting, it would be the things, my example to my children. There's a few things I'd be like, oh yeah, I shouldn't have maybe done that. Then my kids, they copy what you do. So just think about that, all the ways you handle stress or just any kind of habits that you have, those kind of things. And even the way you, like your ideas of study and learning and all those kind of things, are they seeing you be a lifelong learner? Okay, so emotions are the gatekeeper of learning and performance. And you probably know this, if your kid is having a meltdown, they're not going to be able to learn their math lesson right then, right? So emotion drives attention. Attention drives learning, memory, problem solving, and just about everything else. So there you go. It's all about making sure they're in a good emotional state. So we're going to talk a little bit about the brain and neurons. These are neurons, and those little twig-like things that are coming off of them are called dendrites. And everybody, make sure you write down any questions you have at the end or comments and stuff, because I would love to see and hear what you want to say. Let's see. So learning is the result of dendrite growth. For instance, okay, here's a neuron over to the right over here. There's the neuron. You can see the nucleus inside the neuron. The axon comes down, and that neuron can actually come and give information and exchange information with another neuron. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But basically, there's a thing about neurons in your brain. And neurons that have had a lot of exposure to things and have made a lot of what is called synapses and these electrical things with other neurons, they grow more dendrites. So the more twiggy dendrites you have on your neurons, the more learning that you've had in your life. And a study was done where they put even adults in a room with just white walls. And after 4 days of being in a place with nothing and no exposure to anything, the dendrites in their brain began to die off. And so I guess the neurons, that they started losing their dendrites. So making sure that they have exposure to good things, and that is what is going to be the most important thing as far as your child's learning. So the richer the sensory input, the greater the physiological growth in the brain, and thus the greater learning that will be wired into long-term memory. And you can see this right here. For those of you that know this, it's in Spanish Fork, Utah. And we were learning about India at the time. That's my daughter right there. And this experience she had going inside the temple, smelling the smells, seeing the gods in there and all the stuff, that is a much different experience than just looking at a picture of India in a book, right? So you want to have sensory experiences. Okay, so there's 6 kinds of sensory input. And this actually, all of these things I'm sharing are for people who have taught things about the brain. And I can give you some, there's some quotes on here or some references on here that you can see. And the first one is a being there experience. So if you look at these girls, this is a Buddhist temple in Los Angeles. And we were learning about China at the time. And so they're smelling the incense, they're seeing the monks, they're, doing praying and whatever they're doing in there. And they're inside this amazing place. And so the rich sensory input that they're getting is just phenomenal for their learning. And now they can take that back, and as they're studying about China, it brings it more to life. The second one is immersion. So these girls could not live, they can't go back in time in the 19th century and live as a Native American in a teepee. And so what immersion is recreating this thing, which they did. They lived in that teepee for a month. And so here she is making a basket, right? And they've got some acorns there and different things, and they're living it as if they really were back in time, but they're not. So immersion is a great thing, and as you know, kids do that and play all the time. So hands on the real thing. They are not in a garden. They're not having an immersion experience in a garden with flowers. But what they are having is they're doing something that is really vital and important. They're actually dissecting the flowers here and then labeling the parts so they can see the stamen and all these different things. And so hands on the real thing is important to be able to take something back to a lab or something like that. So these are all really important kinds of exposure. One, yes, there's some that might be more sensory rich, but they all have their place. So hands-on representational things. There's Amanda. So she's not in a log cabin, and she isn't interacting with a real spinning wheel in a cabin, but it's a representation of a log cabin. And so that's the hands-on there of a representational item. Then look how far removed the 5th level of sensory input is a book. And sometimes we start with books, and that might not be the best way to give your child exposure to something. A book is so far removed from the real deal. And lastly, look at this, something symbolic. So you trying to teach math to your child with just some symbols on a page is so far removed from reality for them that is really highly advanced to start out with. That 4 means nothing to them unless you actually are teaching them what a 4 represents. Okay, so there's the 6 kinds of sensory exposure. Okay, so one of the best kinds of exposure, though, is a being there experience. And I do want to emphasize that if you can have a being there experience, it's great to have at least one kind of a being there experience to take with you, say, through the rest of the section of what you're learning. They don't always have to have a being there experience, but it is worth the time and energy. And I'm Sacagawea there, and we ended up having an overnight thing and ate salmon that had been cooked in the ground and all these fun things that we did. So it was a memorable way to start out. And this was an opening day for us. So like a kickoff for the year. So I want you to think about this, what the tie could be between these kind of 4 field trips. If you do something without a theme, visiting a silversmith, learning how to do horseback riding, taking a trip to the harbor, or going to a historic reenactment. Those in themselves might be really fun, but they're just little bits of information that are sitting out there in your child's brain. But what if they could all be tied together in a theme? We'll talk about it in a second. So students, this is from Susan Kowalik, students can only dream to the limits of their awareness. And the awareness and their interest does come by exposure. So what if your child is supposed to be a famous opera singer someday, but you never expose them to opera? You see, and I know you don't have to feel like everything is on your shoulders. You don't have to expose them to everything, but just realize that you can expose them to maybe more than the average person. Okay, because you have opportunity. The sky's the limit. And this is what I want to share with you. What your role is to lay out the smorgasbord for your child and expose them to the great and noble ideas and people. So for instance, the way Karen used to say this, she said, you know, there's a different experience you're going to have if you say to a child, when your child says, I'm hungry, think of these two experiences. You can say to them, okay, go look in the fridge. Or you could lay out a smorgasbord for them and show them a variety of things. It doesn't mean they have to try everything. They don't have to try the opera, but if you play it for them or whatever, they're still able to see. Or they don't have to try the potato salad, but at least they know that it's there if they want to. And this was an opening day for us for Magic Carpet Ride. Yeah, Magic Carpet Ride to Lands of Enchantment. That is me in the pink right there. So we're we're laying out a smorgasbord for the kids. You really are the most important factor in your child's exposure to the world. Whatever you like, they're going to be exposed to. Whatever you have passion for, they will be exposed to. And so let's go on to the next part now, patterns. Now that they've been exposed to all these things, what do? We want to put this information in patterns in such a way that now they can retrieve them for long-term memory. So the second function of the brain is to actually make meaning of the information. And their brain is going to try to make meaning of the information and put it someplace in their brain. But what if you give them a pattern ahead of time that will actually, where they've got this place and they go, oh, yep, we can just put it right here, here, and here. And that's how they can make meaning of it. And I'll show you how that works. So your brain is a pattern seeking device. It will make a pattern where no pattern exists, just because it's got to find a place to sit all these bits of information for better retrieval. So they make meaning by sorting their experiences into patterns. So for instance, this was a Shakespeare year that we did. And for our timeline, we didn't have a long enough part on the wall to make a long thing. So you can see how we did it. And they put all of these, they use shields to put all these bits of information, say about English history. Okay, so history is a really easy pattern to give to a kid because everything can fit on a timeline. All right, now, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to divide you guys up in groups really fast. I'm going to name your names right now that I see on here, except it's not going to give it to me. Everybody whose names start between an A and a J, I'm going to have you guys close your eyes first, okay? And don't look. And everybody J on, I hope that, I mean, K on, you leave your eyes open, and you get to leave your eyes open for 10 seconds, okay? And I'm going to show you something. I'm going to have you memorize something. And then you're going to close your eyes, and the other people are going to open their eyes for 10 seconds, okay? Ready? Everybody, A through J, close your eyes. All right, the rest of you have 10 seconds to memorize this and memorize how this fits together. Ready? Just see the edges and everything. Now close your eyes, K through whatever. Now everybody else open your eyes, and you have 10 seconds to memorize these. And some of you already know what this is. Okay, everybody open your eyes and unmute if you can. And will you tell me what number this is? Can anybody unmute and tell me the number?
7.
Who said that? Oh, Nancy, you said that. Okay, it's a 7. You're right. It is a 7. Okay, here, what's this one?
2.
Who said that? What did you say?
2.
Yeah, it's a 2. And what's the next one?
6.
Yes, it's a 6. You know what? I don't know if this worked right with you guys, but when we do this in a big group and we have half the people on this side close their eyes and half the people on this side, it's crazy how the people that we've given a pattern to seem to memorize it better than the people who don't. So here's what the second group saw. No pattern whatsoever. This is what you do when you give your kids bits of information without a pattern. They mentally just have to sit there and memorize. And they memorize it long enough for what? To pass the test, and then they forget it, right? Because you're not going to care about this. But here's what the other group saw. Can you see how if you give your kids a pattern to start out with, now they don't have to memorize useless junk, useless things. It all fits in an orderly manner, and then they can move on and go deeper now in their learning. Okay, so I can't even read this because I can't get to it. Somebody want to read that?
I can.
Expose the information within a pattern. Your child will more easily be able to use catalog and retrieve information for future use.
Yes.
I'll tell. See if you can do it in 15 seconds.
Now you can now mute everybody. I can't mute you for some reason. So if you can all mute. Thank you. So here they are learning about, they were learning about Felicity, an American, not Felicity, whatever her name is, that is from New Mexico in the American Girls. Anyway, we're down in Olvera Street. And so everything they're taking in, they've already got this pattern for learning about the different things of the Mexican culture. And they're just soaking it all in because it's already on a pattern and their brain knows exactly where to put that information. So when the brain sorts data into patterns and then seeks to retrieve the data stored in one neuron can connect with the data stored in other neurons. And this creates what a brain firing electrochemical interaction is called a synapse. This is really what is brains on fire when that happens, because they'll take this piece of information and connect it to this piece and go, oh yeah. And that's what my kids, and when that happens, your brain, your neurons will actually grow more dendrites. And so many times when I explained this to my kids and we taught them this, and we actually showed them this slideshow to my older kids at the end of their years. When we taught them this, they would say, I just grew a dendrite, because they'd connect one piece of information to another. Okay, I want you to tell you this. Colleges are seeing issues with students understanding layers of meaning like symbolism, allegory, analogy, and metaphor. Students find it difficult to go deeper into a subject. You know where I heard this from? My friend was got her master's in some kind of an education thing, and she told me this something like 10 or 15 years ago, where she said, where were her kids going? Someplace in Southern California. But she was talking about how the colleges were recognizing this problem that new students were having, where they didn't even understand what metaphor was. They could not see below one layer of meaning for something. They couldn't see symbolism or anything, which was really crazy to her. But if you've got, that's because to me, it makes it seem like, well, they're just so intense on memorizing what the surface thing is that they can't go any deeper. So we want our kids to see the allegory and the meaning behind things, and to see the deeper layers. If the information is meaningful and your child's brain makes meaning through patterns, his brain will make electrofiring synapse connections and literally be on fire. So to spark brains and hearts on fire, present your information to your child in a pattern with passion. Make sure it's something fun and exciting. And this is what we call epic adventures. So as you can tell, this is that same opening night. And this is Scheherazade, actually. If you know Scheherazade, she was the one who told the stories of the 1001 Nights, the Arabian Nights. She's the one who told the stories to the king, the sultan or whoever it was that she was married to, so that he wouldn't kill her. Love that story. But anyway, here she's signing her autograph, I think, in the kids' journals of discovery that night. And they've just had this really exciting night. And it's their kickoff for the whole year now as they take a magic ride, carpet ride to Lands of Enchantment. So Epic Adventure is a year-long learning pattern that integrates virtually every subject. Not math. We usually don't do math. Sometimes there's math inquiries, math things we learn along the way, but math is a language, and also any other foreign language. And English is a language. You know, anything that's a language has to be built one layer on top of the other, like you usually do your addition before you learn multiplication and fractions. So we don't teach those in a pattern, but other things we do. And some people do learning patterns, like say for a section for like 3 weeks or things like that, where they learn things like that. And that's great and it's fine. But what we do is we take a year-long one, and then within that year-long pattern is where we'll have our 3-week or 6-week like learning sections of patterns. Okay. So curriculum, this is Maria Montessori, if you know her. Curriculum should not be planned in such a manner that each subject is treated as a separate entity, disconnected from everything else. And that's from the expert. So here, my daughter was learning about China, and just coincidentally, which this happens so many times in it, so it wasn't a coincidence, but our neighbors across the street, every year we were going to be learning about something. For some reason, the summer before we were going to learn about it, they would go visit the country we were going to learn about or something. And they just happened to go to China and brought back this outfit. So my daughter learned about paper making and shared it in her presentation, her presentation at the end of our section of China. And so paper making doesn't necessarily have anything to do with China, but it does. And she was able to put it and connect it onto that pattern there. And so, since the Chinese are the ones that came up with it. So that's what I mean of having this year-long theme. So within this theme, I'll show you in just a second. So we call this the Epic Adventure. That's that opening night with Scheherazade, you can see. And I'll show you, I think I show you a little, here it is right here, a magic carpet ride to Lands of Enchantment. So the whole idea is that we wanted to expose the kids to different cultures. And there were 4 things within each of these Lands of Enchantment we were going to go through: the culture, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, there were 4 main things that we were teaching them. So we started out with the land of the nobles, which happens to be Persia or Iran. And that's where the Arabian Nights tales came from, that part too, even though I know Arabia, it's not Arabia, but anyway, Persia. So we got on the carpet ride and we went to Persia, and then we flew east. So we flew down to Land of Bengal Spice, which is India, you can see. Then Land of the Middle Kingdom is China. We're keep flying east. And then we ended up with the Land of the Rising Sun, which is Japan. So if we had just told our kids, okay, this year, our whole theme is going to be about the geography and the culture and whatever the other things were, of these 4 countries. Like that would be really dull and boring to tell them. They'd be like, this is what we have to learn about. But if we couch it in a fun way, like a magic carpet ride to lands of enchantment, and then you put a really cool theme song with it, which we took the Aladdin theme song, I can show you the world. We took that song and we changed the words, and it ended up being this really powerful thing that we would sing like almost every day for our opening of school. So yeah, so within each, so it's a year-long theme, but then you have the different sections. If there's to be power in your learning experiences, it must come from tapping the energies and curiosities of your children and freeing them from artificial fragmentations and unleashing the awesome power of the brain. And that's just it. Artificial fragmentations, like history's over here, and then there's, whatever, the next thing over here, science is over here, and this over here, instead of having it all in these bits and pieces, free them from that and actually let them see how it all fits together in a pattern. When your child repeatedly sees seemingly unrelated things connected in meaningful patterns, his mind will be trained to see the connections between all things. And this is a sign of a Renaissance mind. There's a book called How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci. And the guy who actually wrote that book tells of a time when he would just go in, he would go and give these lectures, and he was known for being to extemporaneously pull things together and find these patterns of things and make things all fit together. And what he would do is he would just ask people in the audience and say, okay, give me an object or whatever and tell me what to speak on. And one time he was standing there at the podium. Will everybody mute? Heidi, can you mute yourself? Do you know how to do that? Thanks. And what he did this one time, there was a styrofoam cup, back when they had those, a styrofoam cup that was sitting on the podium, and that was what he was going to drink out of that night. And somebody from the audience says, can you speak on that styrofoam cup? And this guy gave this amazing lecture for an hour or however long it was. And he went into global politics and the geopolitical machinations of oil and all these different things, and just did this fascinating lecture because he could see how a styrofoam cup was connected to all these amazing things. And so that's how we want our kids' brains to be able to work, is that they see the connections in seemingly unrelated things. So let's look at these ideas again about just like whatever random field trips. So this is the pattern that I did. It's not a blacksmith, but that is Paul Revere. And we went to his house that night. And as he was reading the poem, Listen, My Children, You Shall Hear of the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere by Longfellow. And as he was reading it to them, all of a sudden, the kids hear this yelling outside. And they're saying, the redcoats are coming. The redcoats are coming. Call out the militia, whatever. And my kids started screaming because they knew, because we had been teaching them the story of the revolution. And they started screaming, and they ran to the door, and there was someone else. Anyway, someone else was out there, William Dawes, whatever. And then Paul Revere got on his steed too. And then the kids got to ride through, not really a neighborhood, but they got to ride on the back of a horse at night and warn the town that the redcoats were coming. So that was really exciting. And then we took a trip back east and different things like that. But do you see how, if you went to a reenactment, if you went to a silversmith like Paul Revere, if you went to the harbor and threw tea in the water, which is what we ended up doing too, and like all these things, how now their brains don't have to work super hard to try to figure out meaning from these, or just forget about them because they don't become meaningful to them. If they're not put in a pattern, they're not going to retrieve them, and it won't be meaningful to them. Okay. So your role then is to choose a concept, couch it in the pattern of epic adventure, and then share your passion as you invite them into the adventure. And here's the deal. This is why we chose to do that. This theme this year is because I wanted to learn about the revolution. Later, I had teachers come to me and say, you can't teach your, an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old about the revolution, because that's you don't do that till 5th grade. Well, my kids got really into it, and I remember one of my daughters, the 6-year-old, said, Mom, I don't remember anything we learned in school last year, but I don't think I'll ever forget anything I learned this year. And the year before was we had 1 year without a pattern. And she made that observation herself, that year she thought she would remember everything she had learned. So if teachers would see themselves as purveyors of pleasure rather than instructors of skill, they may find that skill will flourish where pleasure has been cultivated. If you get nothing else tonight, I want you to even take a picture of this or something. This is so true, and I think you know it too. See yourself as a purveyor of pleasure. So for our opening night of Shakespeare, and that's all we studied all year long, was we studied Shakespeare. But on opening night, the kids got to come and meet Queen Elizabeth and have their picture taken with her. And you can see the kids holding they're holding their journals of discovery, which we can talk about that at the end if you want to. And we all had this amazing Shakespeare night. 3 of the moms did a scene from Macbeth, where it was the bubble, bubble, toil and trouble, and we were the 3 witches and doing all this. And we captivated the kids because we showed them what Shakespeare was about. There was a lot of underlying greatness in this whole theme, but that was the excitement for Shakespeare. And what did we learn? Well, I'll just say one of the plays that we learned was The Merchant of Venice. And in that, we ended up taking our kids to a bank, and we had a bank manager come and teach these kids all about finance and how to do budgets and all these kind of things, because we're doing The Merchant of Venice. So see how you can tie all of these amazing things in. So, okay, let's go on to the next one. The next one in EPIC is I. So unleashing your child's lifelong spirit of inquiry. And I'll just say this. When we got finished with our homeschool years, my husband said that the number one thing that you gave to your kids was love of learning, because they're all lifelong learners now. And how many kids have I heard of, and close to me, kids that I've heard of that say once they graduate college and whew, now I'll never have to read another book again, right? Because it wasn't about learning for them. So you do want to unleash their spirit of inquiry. So the brain function number 3 is create new ideas from these meanings. So now that they've learned some stuff, they've been exposed to stuff, they're in the pattern. Now what can they do with this information? So we were learning about the secret garden in the picture on the bottom. And my daughter decided to do a whole research project on ladybugs. And what we learned is that we had been killing the larvae, the ladybug larvae that look so weird, and they do not look like ladybugs, but they are. And they're ladybug larvae, and we'd been killing all those on our rose bushes. So through her spirit of inquiry, we stopped killing our ladybug larvae. Okay. Your child must do something with the information, or he or she really hasn't learned anything, because intelligence is a problem-solving or product-producing capability. This is gold right here too. Here's the next thing I would make sure you get this. This is from Howard Gardner, who is a developmental psychologist known for his theory of multiple intelligences. And if you don't know about that, you might want to see, because it really helps kids see where they fit in, that they don't have to be super smart in every single thing. They can have different kinds of what he calls multiple intelligences. That's fascinating. Yeah, if you don't know his stuff, you might want to look that up and just see what you think about it. But I love this. So intelligence is a problem-solving, product-producing capability. It's not answering questions on a worksheet. Back in my day, they were called dittos. They were the dittos that we off the mimeograph machine. And what Susan Kovalik used to say is dittos don't make dendrites. They don't. Your kids cannot grow a dendrite from answering questions in a workbook. So numerous studies suggest that brains of spectators, however rich the visual images, are no different from those brains which have lived in impoverished environments like that, like those four walls. So if there's no active involvement, there's minimal activity in the brain, meaning anything your kids see on a screen, it is not real learning. Okay, just hopefully let that sink in. Watching a movie that goes with something that they did, great, because it helps them see things. But just know that it ends up, if it's just screen time, it's impoverished environment. Inquiries are activities in which your child works with the information according to his or her individual choices, interests, and talents. So they're not going to all do the same kind of thing. They're not going to learn the same kind of thing, but they get to pick from their own choices and interests. Inquiries give your child the opportunity to experiment with the information and think creatively and see new possibilities and create new ideas. You might be able to guess that they're building a covered wagon, which we had done this years before with my older kids, but they actually took part of my, we got rid of our waterbed, and we knew how to put together this. So anyway, so they're making a covered wagon, and then we had this big covered wagon thing that I sewed out of sheets years before, and so they're recreating this for learning about Kirsten in the American Girl Year. Provide meaningful inquiry choices to allow your child to work with the information. And meaningful, you know what makes things meaningful? Their brains have to decide what is meaningful, but if you're excited about it, they usually get excited about it. One of my friends, I remember her telling me in her college class how she never cared about astronomy before, but she was really getting excited about astronomy. Why? The teacher. And as Susan Kowalik says, the teacher makes the difference. Her teacher was fabulous. Her teacher was excited about it. They'll get excited about it. Don't share stuff with your kids unless you're going to get passionate about it. And here's my side note, because I didn't tell you in here, but guess what brings passion? Study. One year I did a World War II year. I didn't care about World War II. I didn't want to know anything about it. I didn't care about it. But anyway, long story, we decided to do this World War II year for certain reasons. And I became super passionate about it and loved it. And that passion comes through. And so you get excited about it, and then it'll be no problem with your kids. So during the magic carpet ride, my daughters made a Japanese garden complete with goldfish koi. So one day I woke up and I just felt uninspired. I was like, what are we supposed to do now? We're in Japan, whatever. But I wanted to do something fun. I couldn't think of anything. Everything that we had listed didn't sound that exciting. So I thought, what could we do? And I just looked up, what are some of the elements of a Japanese garden? And, things like, you can't really see it in there, but there is sand right there on the right-hand side of that one big picture. I'm making what is that kind of a garden called? Anyway, the kind that you had to do with sand. Now my mind's blank. But anyway, we spent all day making this Japanese garden, and they loved it. They'll never forget it, because then we went to the pet store and bought some goldfish koi for their pond. So I just want to help you realize that when you want to give your kids ideas, and then sometimes they'll come up with their own. So on the left here, Amanda did a whole research project on wildflowers, and she spent all year long learning about these wildflowers. And on the right here, Autumn is doing a topographical map of India. Okay, so whatever appeals to their things, and that doesn't mean that they're only doing art inquiries or whatever. They're doing science inquiries, they can do geography inquiries, there's all different kinds, but make sure there's enough variety so that they get excited about some of this. And show your kids what the spirit of inquiry looks like by actually being excited to learn. Help your child discover ways to research and provide her with a way to obtain the tools, skills, and materials for her problem-solving, product-producing ventures. And also provide an atmosphere of trust that avoids threat. Remember about the emotion, how the emotion drives attention, and attention It drives everything else. So if there's no threat, then and your kids can be in this place of calmness and happiness or whatever, that's going to help them in their quest to learn. So let's do the last one here. Lastly is contribution. How can we inspire our child to make a difference and make a contribution to the world? So brain function number 4 is acting on those ideas. So your role is to give your child a pattern with inherent greatness and significant meaning connected to their lives. So here, the inherent greatness in this is that they're learning about the American Revolution and fighting for freedom and the Declaration and the Constitution. I mean, that's an inherently great pattern to stick all this stuff on. Yes, it's a history pattern, but there's other things that you put into it that is a great thing. I don't think learning about dinosaurs all year is a great pattern to give your kids. Like, what does that mean? We always made sure our patterns had lots of layers. So here, let me just tell you about this genius study. And it is from Reed Benson, if you've ever read Seedbed for Greatness. So a high degree of attention focused upon the child by parents and other adults, expressed in intensive educational measures and usually abundant love. So what they learned in this genius study that was done, they looked at these geniuses throughout history and tried to figure out what did they all have in common. Here's one of them. There's 4 things they all had in common, 3 or 4. Anyway, that they all had in common. And here's one of them. And when you're spending 2 or 3 hours a day with your kids unintentional in educational measures, that's intensive enough. Okay. Isolation from other children, especially outside the family. Isn't this interesting? Not that you have to isolate your kids from other children completely. That's not. But that is something that they found in the Genius study, that if you let kids just be with kids their own age all the time, guess what? They're just going to stay at that level. So some of the isolation that we're doing by ourselves at home, where they can see your example to them instead of just a 5-year-old's example of how to handle stress, right? And a rich efflorescence of fantasy comes, this is the result, as a reaction to the preceding conditions. So if your kids are having fantasy and they're figuring out things and they're trying to, doing a lot of play that is rich, like what I showed you about the teepee, living in the teepee for a month, that comes as a result of this kind of thing. So when you see your kids doing that, you know that they're actually being geniuses. Okay, the more powerful a brain, the more complex, finer, and subtle patterns it can detect, such as seeing symbolic meaning connected to one's own life. So that's what we want to be able to see. We want to see those subtle patterns, and you see the symbolic meaning in everything. So here's what I want to just mention right here. This was one of our, instead of just saying to our kids, okay, we're going to have a music history year. We didn't tell them that. We actually told them it's called an unfinished symphony. And we took Schubert's unfinished 8th symphony as the music for it. And yes, doing a music history year might sound really boring to somebody, right? But what we wanted to do was infuse it into something great. And so instead of just saying it's a music history year, we wanted to teach them that their life is like a symphony that they're composing right now. And who's going to help them? The master. The master helps them. And he ends up being the counterpoint of their own will, like it says in here, the counterpoint of my volition. And we used Schubert's music. So we're exposing them to great music at the same time. My life's a symphony, a work of art I am composing. Each trial and triumph, a greater melody beholding. My life song unfolds. Okay, so anyway, every theme had a deeper, greater meaning to it. And so right there in the pattern that we gave our kids was what we gave them already had layers to it before the year even started. So that's what we want to give them, is something great. figure out what the deeper meaning is. Okay. Your role, again, nothing your child is exposed to is insignificant. Your role in the epic adventure is to share the highest and the best with your child, because we become what we gaze upon. And that's it. Like the way you eat, the way you talk, the way you treat your parents, whatever it is, that exposure is super important. Courageous beings have brains and hearts on fire, and they can make contributions that can change the world. So you are the spark that lights your child's brain and heart on fire. Oh, by the way, that's Karen. That's Karen and me. That's the end of my my Shakespeare year. So romance your child's heart. Out-romance the competition. There is a book called Romancing Your Child's Heart, and it's all about how Hollywood spends big bucks trying to romance your child's heart into what they want to have happen for them, about how they want your child to spend their time, their money, etc., and what they want them to become. And we can't just sit back and say, well, you know, we're going to do public school at home in our workbooks. Your child's heart is not going to be romanced by that. So you want to out-romance the competition for sure. Just dive deep with whatever you're going to do in your pattern. So here's what we did. Gather information through exposure, make meaning of the information through patterns, create new ideas through inquiry, and act on those ideas through contribution. So I'm going to let you guys see these. All right, at the end of our first year of homeschooling, we threw all those workbooks in the trash. And it struck me, what did we really learn for an entire school year? This is what Karen told me years ago. This is what we would share at the end of our, the things that we would do when we put on, you know, presentations and stuff. And really, there's everything they learned in the trash can. What did they really learn that year then? It's all sitting in there. So remember that education is not the filling of the pail, but the lighting of a fire. And I just have to say, the lighting of this fire, my daughter is Joan of Arc there. She made that chainmail herself from metal. And she took horseback riding lessons. She came in and she learned the whole story of Joan of Arc, and there's more to that. But she came in her presentation and shared with all the kids, and they're just spellbound because of what she put into that. And then they were inspired to move forward and do other things too. But yeah, she'll never forget this, right? Because this is way more than just a workbook or a book. So that is it. And I'm going to take some questions here at the end. I'm going to stop sharing with you guys. All right. Does anybody have any questions or comments? And I do have some things I can show you. I have a few minutes left. But if you have questions, go ahead and unmute. And if you guys want to, show me your video, you can do that too.
Thank you, Jeannie. It's me, Jen.
Welcome. Glad you could.
Thank you so much for doing this for us. Sometimes I'm looking at the pictures and I'm thinking, I don't know how on earth I'm going to be able to to do some of these things like you did. And I feel the overwhelm setting in. How long did you take to prepare for some of these things, like your World War II year? Like, did you just spend the summer reading lots of books, or did you kind of learn as you went so it wasn't as, I don't know, as intense preparation for you?
So the first year I actually did it, and if you go look at my 24 years of homeschooling.blogspot.com, if you will go and look at the Colonial Escapade, I think we did, I think I did four posts on Colonial Escapade. That was actually our first year, and we did not spend very much time at all. We only did it with one other family. We had no idea what we were doing. But we knew that we wanted a pattern. We wanted some songs. We wanted some field trips, and we learned as we went along. By the time 22 years came, and we did, and at the end of at the beginning of 22 years, man, I had it perfect. And so there's never a perfect school year. My 22nd one was the most perfect I've ever done. So there's never a perfect thing, but especially if you can collaborate with at least one person, it helps you. And so it helps you to be able to do that. It can be pretty simple though. And I can show you how ours was really pretty simple. You know where you get key points from a children's book? That is the best place to get key points. If you try to get key points from an encyclopedia, you're like, wait, what do they need to learn? But like, if you want to teach your kids about, say, the Boston Tea Party, just get a really simple book, a kid's book about the Boston Tea Party. We didn't have internet when I first started. And we would take key points directly out of those because they were the simple jumping off points. Yeah, and this is what I have not, you guys, this is just like kind of the intro, right? And it's not the how. I haven't told you about the how to do it. But after that, I had a lot of collaboration with women, but I did spend a lot of time learning. And by the time I got finished with every year, I felt like I had a master's degree in it because I did, it was really intense, but I had the time to do it. So I did. At the same time, you can pick your basic things. And we do have a lot, for those of you that don't know, we have a lot of these that are written already that you can actually buy. I don't earn any money from it, but we've taken some of these things, like my World War II year is actually, you can buy that. And somebody had put together, what is the name of that? Is it Epic Adventures? Oh, it's HS Epic Adventures, right? Let me look. I think it's HS Epic Adventures. And I think that's where you can buy some curricula to start out with. Yeah, HS, so homeschoolingepicadventures.com.
Okay.
I can pop it in there too. And Jen, you're not that far from me, so I can help you. Does anybody here that is on here tonight, are you guys does anybody homeschool in Southern Utah? I think that everybody else has their own group. Is that right? Do all of you guys have your own group? Or does anybody know anybody that is homeschooling down in Southern Utah, like around St. George area, or that wants to do a theme? Because Jennifer Chafee right here, you can see she's starting out doing one this next year, and she would like to collaborate with somebody.
That's exactly right. And you really nailed it, Jeannie. Like, I think I'm looking forward to throwing away the workbooks. I'm not inspired sitting and doing an English lesson and a math lesson. And, I'm burned out after doing, an hour and a half of that with each kid every day. It's not as enriching and it's not as fulfilling as I'm dreaming of. And what you're talking about is much more dreamy. So my name's Jen. I'm in Southern Utah. I have 4 kiddos that I'm homeschooling. So yes, if you're interested, I don't know, maybe I'll put in the chat my phone number and you guys just message me. Okay. Copy down.
If anybody knows anyone in Southern Utah, that is interested or that is thinking about
Jeannie.
Yeah.
This is Amanda. And I just want to make a comment about Jen. I think you said your name is Jennifer. That it does look like a lot of work, and it is a lot of work, but also it can be as simple as possible too. Like, I don't know, we did a Western year one year, and we drive around and my kids would say, "Oh, barbed wire," and be like, okay, we did school for the day. Like they're so excited about, your overall school year is really fun. But yeah, it takes quite a few weeks during the summer, and we're pulling together book lists and we're making costumes if that's what we're doing now. I was one of those girls, definitely with the bangs in those pictures. And, I grew up, there were 4 sisters and 1 brother, and we were always wearing costumes and everything. And I just pictured teaching my kids the same. Like we'd always be wearing these great costumes. My kids would be making corn husk dolls all the time. It would be magical. Well, I had 4 boys, and my boys are very active and they like sports. So how did I adapt it? I'm not a great seamstress like mom. I don't make great, beautiful theme posters like my mom, but I do resource that. I know how to use Facebook Marketplace, and my boys kind of grew out of costumes. And so we just do it our own way and we make it. But I do a lot of study at the beginning so I can write my key points, because I want my information at my fingertips throughout the year,
Yeah.
so I don't have to relearn everything. But then throughout the year, I'm also, it's so exciting. Every school year is so exciting. But if like we're doing Helen Keller, I'm going to read a bunch of books to my kids about Helen Keller and Louise Braille and Anne Sullivan. But then I'm also going to read like a mom book at a different level. And it's just so fun. Yeah, it's busy, but it's like the best busy, but you can make it as simple as possible too. As simple as you need. If you're pregnant that year, do it different,
So
I don't know if
Amanda, would you agree that for me, if you had to make it as simple as possible, you need the pattern, right? You need to know the pattern. This is the school year. The pieces of each one are called the components. So maybe you only have 3 or 4 components. Know what those are, and like have a poster that you put together or something. And if you go look at Colonial Escapade on my blog, I drew that, and it's really amateurish. And guess what? It doesn't matter. Okay. And that was the theme poster. So you have a theme poster, you have a theme song that you put together. And if you don't want to, you can write it with your kids, or, I can help you and give you one of mine or whatever, that kind of thing. And then have some journals of discovery. Hopefully you guys know about journals of discovery, like these kinds of things where they're putting in, their pictures. And this is great. If they did nothing else, one of my ladies that I collaborated with, she said, knowing this revolutionized their whole year. Because what the kids would do is she'd print out the pictures of the year. Like this is on our opening day at home. They'd print out a picture of, say, a field trip or something they did, paste it in their journal of discovery, and then write about it. And it was genius, because now the kids can see what they've done. And then when grandma comes over, they can go, look what we learned, right? And so, so that's what I would do, is have a theme poster, a song that brings all the emotion and everything, and some journals of discovery. And then the rest you can kind of figure out as you go along, like field trips and stuff. There's so many years where I scrambled because I was pregnant. I was pregnant all through that time of 24 years. And I did scramble, and some years I did great things, and some years it wasn't as great, but there were still the memorable things from each year. You'll find your way.
I love that. I would add t-shirts, because if you wear your t-shirts, you're basically doing school,
So
But I love
we
all
never
those, yeah.
did t-shirts. Do you know that, Amanda? But you have boys too. We had
What?
costumes so much.
Yeah.
But they had t-shirts with like their logo on it, and then would wear them to their like field trips and stuff. And you've got more boys, so Jen, so that would probably be good for you to maybe not do costumes and just have t-shirts. Yeah.
It would.
Bridie.
No.
Bridie,
Go ahead.
what were you gonna say, Bridie?
Oh, when you have a second, I have a comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
So one thing that I've liked to do when I've done it simple, and I'm really blessed to be in a really great group right now. A couple of the girls are on right now. But especially when it's been the busy years, or the things where hard things are happening, or when I was solo, just picking a few, saying, okay, here's my components, here's the topics I want to cover. I want to make sure I hit these main things. And, you know, we're going to do this in August, we're going to do this loosely in September, whatever. And then having some read alouds, even if it's like 4, 1 for each component or something. And then that ties it into. So if you've got your read alouds connected, you have a song, which you don't have to write. I'm not a songwriter, so I would pick songs that went along with it. So we did a Doctor Who year when some of my kids, oh, my oldest were like 15 and 14, and one was really into Doctor Who. It was about 10 years ago. And we just picked, I just got the song The Impossible Dream, because it was Doctor Who and the dreamers of the, I don't know, 20th century or whatever. And we went through the United States, the dream, you know, all the dreamers for, you know, like, I'm going to lose my vocabulary here, but we did all these important people, Disney and Henry Ford, and we did history of the 20th century through all these different people. And our song was The Impossible Dream, and I found an awesome kind of soft woman singing it, very modern with the guitar a cappella. And boy, it made me cry every time I heard it, right? So you don't have to necessarily write your own song, even if you just find a song that speaks to you. I've had a lot of years where I just found a song that speaks to me, but the song's important. And the other girls in my group, we had a really special song this year, and we had some really hard things happen to one of the families in our group, and that song became their theme song. And all of us, and a lot of us can't get through it without crying, because it just ended up meaning so much to us in so many ways. So the theme song's great, but you don't have to write, is all I'm saying. It's easy to do it simple. I've done really, really simple, but you can still have the overarching thing if you bring it up often and connect, you know, even if you're doing math books and English curriculum on the side, and you are saying, okay, let's sing our theme song, let's read our history, let's pick some science that goes along with the theme, and you just have 5 things figured out that you're going to do every month, you're golden. That's all you really need, and the big stuff comes later. That's my 2 bits.
That is perfect, Bridie. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yes. Okay, Bridie, where are you located?
California.
Sorry, I am no longer in Southern Utah. I was for a few years, but I'm in Central California.
Well, that's cool. Good for you. I'm glad you're here in our Zoom. And good finding an awesome group to do epic adventures with. That's what I'm that's what I'm dreaming of. That's what we're hoping for.
I just lucked out.
So I realized before I started this tonight that I thought, you know, this really just kind of gives the overview, and now what do you actually do and how do you put it together? And I think I'm going to just do another, like either a Zoom or something, and just record myself so I can share with you just really loosely how I would put together a year, and like show you some things of how you can put together a year. And just so you know, and my blog tells things about it, but it might be too much. But some years, like we did videos of things and did a whole video, and then we didn't do that again. And one of the things I really love that I wish we had done more, but we just didn't, but I wish that we had done them, is the open house at the end of the school year. Every time we did that, it was fabulous, and my kids became more enthusiastic. And what it was we did it the first theme. And what we did was we made this little flyer, and it was an invitation to our relatives and our friends and all the neighbors. And we just invited them to come see what we learned at our homeschool. And we told them it was like a colonial adventure, because that's what it was, a colonial thing. Some guy came with his old colonial, he had an old colonial like replica of a gun, and he had a coonskin cap like Daniel Boone, who was colonial times. And all of us dressed up, and I was in my macaroni, which they called those hairdos back then. And you probably saw my hair. It was shaving cream macaroni, you know, and we dressed up in our stuff. And then we were able to show and we put out all these displays of all the things we learned that year. And that got the kids, it anchored everything into them to realize what they had learned all year long. And it was just a way to share with everybody. And our guests loved it and the kids loved it. I would say put forth the effort to do it, because it makes it even more, like, twice as magical, I think. That's one thing I would do more. I did a few of them, but I didn't do them for 24 years. So no matter what you learn, you're just try to keep, take a picture of it, stick it in your journal of discovery, right? Like all the stuff that you're learning, and then write about it. And then you'll see at the end of the year, oh, we actually did something, instead of, workbooks in the trash. Okay, somebody said yes, please. So I will do a Zoom with you guys if you want to ask questions. Oh, you're welcome. Thank you, Catalina. That's pretty. If you want to be on a Zoom with me while I share it, or if you just want me to record it and send it to you, I can do that too. But does anybody else have any other questions? Tell me what you want, like in the chat. Do you want to do a Zoom where I just tell you what we did and like how to do it, like how I would put it together and ideas of what we did? Or should I just, if I do it on a Zoom, then it's more of a possibility that I will get it done, right? Because I
Jeannie.
have to show up. Yes. Hi.
Yes, I think we should definitely do part 2. I think that would be great. We're just finishing up, our group is finishing up our 3rd year together of doing this Epic Adventures. But there's been like new things that have sparked since I've listened to you. And also just wondering if you have any advice for the older, like the high school years, like what kind of thoughts you have for continuing on through the high school years.
Okay, I'm going to tell you, this is what we learned. We figured it out, right, Amanda? We figured this out the year my daughter was 15 or something like this. Anyway, and it was the most magical year. And I was like, I finally figured out what to do with teenagers. This is so awesome. And what it was, I mean, there was a lot behind this, but what we did was we had 5 components. A little teeny one at the beginning, like a 2-week one, and a little one at the end, and then 3 major. So we basically had 3 major components. We took each component and we broke it into 6-week slots. And that's something I need to discuss with you guys too on the next Zoom. But we broke into 6-week slots. Within the 6-week slot, we broke those into 2-week slots. So now we've got 3 6-week slots broken into, okay, so 3 6-week slots broken into 2 things each. So that ends up being 9 sections, right? So 2 2 2 2 2 2 2 2 2. It was 9 sections. Got it? Does that make sense? It was, yeah. So it was 3 major components broken into 3 topics each. So there's 9 components at what we had. We happen to have 9 teenagers. And we took those 9 teenagers, and instead of us being the visitors or our friends being the visitors, we gave them the responsibility. They had to do all the research. They had to come up with their costume with their parents' help, usually. And I remember Bridie's daughter, she actually, her component was all about St. Francis of Assisi. So she wasn't St. Francis of Assisi, but she had her dad do it, and he happened to be bald, and she made a tonsure for him, like Francis of Assisi. And like he came, so she wrote all the stuff out for him, and she put stuff together. She put out the group inquiries. So like they had the ideas for the group inquiries of what we would do that day. So what the teenagers would do is they do all the research and they'd figure out everything they wanted to teach that day, like 15-minute key point presentation, and they dress up and they'd share, and then we'd have these like maybe 3 group inquiries of things they could do. And it was the most magical thing with these teenagers. They just they glommed onto this stuff, and they'd come up with these really exciting things, right, Bridie? I mean, it was such a magical year. It was it was perfect for the teenagers. I will address that more. Let's do a Zoom on that. If you guys want to, I could set up a time right now.
That
Because-
was the year. Oh, sorry, Jeannie.
yeah, go for it.
I need a hand. I need to figure out how to raise my hand.
You're fine.
So that was the year that they did the Joan of Arc as well. So
That
that
was-
was her specialty
Yeah.
and that she presented. And then
And she
India
worked
did
way
the,
more on it than for 2 weeks, obviously. She did a
Yeah.
whole, it was like almost the whole 1 year. What we did at the beginning of the school year is we told them about the 9 sections. And then we said, what do you want to do? And we let them help pick. There were a few people that wanted to do Joan of Arc, and we drew straws and all that kind of stuff. But they did such an amazing job of, and then guess what? These little kids now are looking at the teenagers going, oh man, and they're listening way more than they would ever listen to us, right? Because these teenagers are cool. And that was the best thing these kids did. And they collaborated with each other. We were teaching Latin that year too. And so all these 9 were in a big Latin class together. It was really fun. I would say if your child is over 10, you really need at least one other family to work with, and you need to have some friends for them. If they're over, yeah, I would say over 10. When they're younger, they don't need as much, but when they hit teenage years too, especially, it's really important they have some peers. So I would really do that. Okay, I could do something June 4th, which is a Tuesday night, or June 3rd. Those are like the soonest I could do it. Somebody put something in the comment. Do you guys want to vote? Does anybody want to vote? Do you guys want to have a Zoom then? Of June 3rd or June 4th? I would be glad to do it and show you what I mean about putting a year together and share some things that I learned. The 4th. Okay, somebody is saying the 4th. Or any dates, either dates. Okay, so whoever invited you, all of you, I mean, I told the Kindred girls, which is Bridie and Amanda and Brittany and Sadie and Ashley. Oh, and she said the 3rd. You guys put your votes in, because otherwise. Okay, is 7:30 work for you guys too? I think we'll do 7:30. So Aubrey, you're not available. Wait. Bridie, you're telling her that she's not available on the 3rd? You guys can unmute and talk to each other if you want. That's funny. Okay, it looks like the 4th is what we need to do, since Aubrey, you're not available on the 3rd. Okay, let's do the 4th, 7:30 p.m., same time, same Zoom. Okay, I'm going to put it on my calendar right now. I will put something together and show you some pictures and show you some things, and try to, anyway, be inspiring. How's that? And if you have any questions, here, let me stop this recording.